Solo. On everywhere.
Yeah, that's right. That conversation is going on everywhere. Welcome back, everyone, to the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, as always, joined by Joe Resinello. And once more, dear brothers and sisters, we are going into the breach. And obviously, you know, we're going across many, many pages right now on YouTube and Facebook, the whole 9 yards. Make sure wherever you see us, please. We don't really ask for money. We do make it clear that we are on Patreon. If you want to drop in a few bucks, you're more than welcome to at patreon.com/frontline with Joe and Joe. If you see us on YouTube, if you see us on Facebook, if you see us on Twitch, if you see, wherever you see us, whatever you could do to click a button, like, subscribe, share, whatever's called for, please help us in that way. And by all means, please share our videos, okay? And as we always tell you, our audience is growing and growing and growing. It's thanks to you. It's thanks to your prayers. It's thanks to your support, and we really, really appreciate it. Couple of notes, okay? Joe and I, as you know, are on the Crusade channel. Our show is on Monday afternoon, 3 hours. That is a subscriber-based channel, but they offer a free 30-day subscription, so you could check out Mike Church, you could check out Rick Barrett, you could check out Joe and Joe on that station, and we definitely think that's worth your time. Joe and I are now on AM radio, and Joe and I are on the Veritas Catholic Network, the app for which you could download in your app store, okay? Veritas Catholic Network. It's a radio station that covers Connecticut and Northern Long Island and parts of Westchester with a reach of about 900,000. And that particular station, those who own that station, are their goal is to take over another station in Westchester that covers the 5 boroughs of New York City. Either way, it's a great step up, a great opportunity for Joe and I. That will be a purely interview show. And to start off with a splash, okay, because you know the way we are, our first interview aired today at Sundays at 5 o'clock is when the show is on. And we did an interview with Bill Donahue talking about the Equality Act. We recommend all of you download their app. And they do have podcasts and things like that where they rebroadcast the shows. That's a show you're going to want to listen to. Again, that's AM radio. So we're very, very proud of that. And we're thankful to Veritas for giving Joe and I an opportunity. And of course, as always, thank you all. We have a really good conversation for you tonight. Not necessarily a long one, but a good one. You have Milo Yiannopoulos. Everybody out there probably has seen over the last week or so, Milo has now come out. See, Milo was flamboyantly gay. Now Milo is flamboyantly straight, okay? Milo doesn't do anything without a little flamboyance, okay? But there's some stuff to talk about there. And we want to talk about that because Milo is putting down his homosexual lifestyle. I think that says a lot. And he's a guy who's in the news and controversial to begin with. We think that, because Joe and I are kind of controversial, we want to get into that one. Also, Jordan Peterson, who is, most of you know, has become an internet sensation over the last several years. Very intelligent guy. He's throwing out some feelers that he may be coming into the Catholic Church. And we want to talk about that, all right? And give you Joe and I's take on these two men and what they're going through right now, because they are going through a lot. Also, and a couple that we have to get into, You got the Equality Act. We're going to talk a little bit about that. Okay, there is a bishop and most of the bishops have come out against the Equality Act. All right, have been vocal about it. This particular bishop was talking about it being a Trojan horse. We discussed this with Bill Donahue. We're going to discuss a portion of that with you tonight. When you talk about cancel culture, okay,
this is a great story.
When you talk about cancel culture, okay, what about, see, there are those who are unwilling to be canceled, okay? Joe and I, let's say, to use as an example, you ain't canceling us, okay? We're going to fight tooth and nail. We don't care what you have to say. But what about these people out there when there's a threat of cancellation? They fold like a cheap camera, man.
Well, dude, their circle is in the mainstream, Joe.
Yeah.
And that's their money stream. So, I mean, it's either change your life, be willing to do that, or basically comply.
They're right. And we're going to get into that story because, and it's a good one because, well, you're going to get the twist when we get to the story. It has to do with the lead guitarist and banjoist for the band Mumford and Sons. Okay. There is a twist there, and it's something that's right up our alley that we're going to get into about that. And you want to know something? If you spend your life worrying about which cartoons you're going to cancel, you are an empty human being, my friend. You're an empty human being. It was Dr. Seuss last week. I think a couple months ago it was they canceled Yosemite Sam, man.
Yeah, he has a badass mustache.
Yeah, a badass mustache. I'm pretty sure somebody told me recently they want to cancel Foghorn Leghorn. I love Foghorn Leghorn, son. And then he gives the slap to the little chicken hawk. I'm a chicken hawk, and you're a chicken. But now they're canceling Pepe Le Pew, and I like Pepe Le Pew. But we're going to have to get into that because that's almost a humorous story. Because again, if you spend your life worrying about which cartoons you're going to cancel, okay, you are an empty person. So we want to get into all of that. In the meantime, I'm kicking it over to Joe.
So as Joe said, activist Milo Yiannopoulos. I'm actually proud of myself that I got that right.
You got it right.
That's a toughie.
We were saying before the show, he's like, he when you think about Milo Yiannopoulos, he's probably got an Uncle Gus that owns a diner in Jersey, like on Route 17 or something.
Milo is now ex-gay, and he's consecrating his life to St. Joseph. Interesting. For those who don't know who Milo is, the gay man whose conservative messaging and willingness to speak the truth sparked riots on university campuses may well trigger more outrage now that he's describing himself as ex-gay and sodomy-free and is leading a daily consecration to St. Joseph online. 2 years ago, when church, this is where it potentially could have sparked, actually probably even further back from that by the Holy Spirit, but 2 years ago, church militant Michael Voris challenged Yiannopoulos to live a chaste life. Yiannopoulos was not defensive. Instead, he acquiesced and humbly admitted his human weakness. And he says, I know everything you're saying, and I'm just not there yet. And I don't know if I'll ever get there. He told this divorce at the time. Well, it seems like he's arrived. Let me just touch on a couple things. Ex-gay. This goes against the narrative. They say you're born that way. Mm-hmm. By the way, there is no science on the earth that shows that. Anybody who says that you're born gay, what you have to say to them is this: show me the science. Show me the science.
And they can't.
There is no science. Right. That's a fact. That's number one. Number two, in our interviews, we interviewed another man who lived a gay lifestyle. I don't even think it's a good term, ex-gay. I would say you lived a gay lifestyle at one time in your life. Was Joseph Chiambra. Mm-hmm. And he wrote a very good book on this called Disordered. You should buy that book. Joe's a great guy. He's a friend of our show. And he talks about a lot of times what brings somebody to that lifestyle. A lot of times it could be a father issue. In the case of Joseph Chiambra, his father and him never gelled. He never had that, like, his father and him were distant from one another. So he didn't have that, like, relationship with a man, like in the house, as in a dad. And that's what led him to the lifestyle. And then he came out of the lifestyle, and he credits his father for praying the rosary. But this is an interesting story because it breaks the narrative of the mainstream, not just the media, but also Hollywood. He's ex-gay. Mm-hmm. That means it's a choice. It's a choice. And this is where, and Joe and I have talked about this on the show, where if people dig down deep into why they feel that way, they may discover that it's basically a result of an event in your life that you're feeling this way, and it could be corrected.
I always thought that, you know, when you know something about this, when you bother, see, if you want to know about this stuff, something tells me it's because you want to help people. It doesn't come now. Some people are haters. We know that. Okay. They're just looking for reasons to hate gay people. And there will always be people in the world that are like that. Okay. But when you're trying to understand, when you're trying, the big word that always goes around, empathize. All right. When you're trying to show empathy towards someone, then you want to know what you're talking about. Okay, especially when it comes to the radical left, who basically what they do is they do the Joseph Goebbels, okay, who was Hitler's propaganda minister. Okay, say the lie often enough, repeat it often enough, as loud as you can, and people will start believing it. But there's plenty of people like us, a lot more people than Joe and I, who are out there saying, no, 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 you are not born gay. And the reason why I bring that up is this: Milo's not different from a lot of people. And anybody suffering from same-sex attraction are not different from a lot of people. There's something early on, usually early on in their lives, okay? Sometimes they don't even remember. Sometimes they don't even remember. That's why it's the reason for therapy, all right? In other words, which obviously has been banned. But anybody who does conversion therapy tries to get at the root of what triggered this same-sex attraction. But remember, we're not singling out people. Okay, nobody singled out Milo Yiannopoulos. Nobody's singling out, let's say, gay people, okay, those who have same-sex attraction, because there's a lot of disorders that people have that have developed from a very early age because of an event. So let's say, for argument's sake, there's a father who's an alcoholic, okay, and the son grows up and he becomes a drinker, let's say, as he gets into his teens, and he becomes an alcoholic. That's not genetic. It's a learned behavior.
Exactly.
Okay, and then in the same way, a ruptured relationship with a father, when an impressionable young boy wants to be affirmed by another male, can then fall into same-sex attraction, okay, because there's a ruptured relationship. My point is that there's a reason for it. Milo acknowledges that, okay? Milo acknowledges that what he's done, and this is why they hate him, and that's why I'm bringing it up. What Milo, how he's lived has been a choice that he's made. That's the bottom line. Well, and that's why he was, real quick, he was already, if you look at all his speeches, I was telling Joe before the show, one speech he gave that really, I'm talking about the leftist brains, exploded, because Milo goes on the circuit to college campuses and all that, right? One of the lectures he gave was, this was the title of it, "The Catholic Church is right about everything." This is an openly gay man saying that. And he's saying the Catholic Church is right about everything. So he's been planting the seed. And what he's done is he's recognized, as Joe alluded to in Milo's interview with Michael Voris, is that basically, I know I'm not living up to the teachings of the church.
Well, who does?
But I'm trying. That's my point.
Who does? I mean, you know, when I read this quote, it reminded me of St. Augustine, because he said the same thing. So St. Augustine, if you read his book Confessions, he was a worldly man. And he also had a child outside of wedlock, and he was married. He had, like, to be honest with you, I think she was a concubine, to be honest with you, that he had a child with. But the point of the matter is, when he talked about living a chaste life, he said, "Not yet." I'm paraphrasing. And that's what he's saying. And the difference here with Milo and other people, with any sin, not just homosexuality, it could be any sin. It could be, to be honest with you, you're contracepting. If you're Catholic, that's a sin.
Right.
It could be you're living with your girlfriend.
Right.
That's a sin. It's, to be honest with you, it's the same thing. To be honest with you, in the eyes of God, they're sins. But he's willing to say that it's a sin. He's not rationalizing it. You see, that's the difference.
That's what puts him on the hit list of the left.
But I'm just
right
talking,
there.
but actually, but that puts him on the road to God. And that's where we all want to be.
Doesn't that put you on the hit list?
Well,
of the
yes,
left
it does.
too?
But I mean, like, you know, it's one thing in life to say, like the tax collector in the back of the church. This was a reading at Mass recently, where he just says, you know, "I'm a sinner." Well, Milo's acknowledging that. He's basically saying, like, I have an addiction. He almost refers to it. He does refer to it. It's my addiction. I look at it as an addiction. Yeah. And that's the difference. You see, many times in people's lives, they rationalize things. They don't come to terms with themselves. They don't call things what they are. You see, that's what makes him different. And I'll be honest with you, he's humble. And I'll tell you this, God is close to him. I will guarantee that, because he's acknowledging his imperfections. And he's basically saying, and he's trying.
That's the key though. He's trying. Two things. One is, this is what I would say makes Milo a particularly brave individual. Okay. And I don't use that word for a lot of people, but there's a reason why I'm saying that. And you can tell me if you agree with me in the chat room or not. Please, Joe, tell me if you agree. By being conservative and openly and flamboyantly gay, he cheesed off the left. So they had their sights on him. But let's make no mistake about it. There's plenty of people on the right who probably had no time for Milo either, because they're saying, well, if he's conservative, why is it, if he's speaking this way about the Catholic Church and the Catholic teaching and all that, then why does he continue to live that lifestyle? Which he ran the risk in I think being truthful. He was truthful about his homosexuality, and he was truthful about his Catholic faith. Okay. And he ran the risk of alienating both and being completely on his own. And I think for a while he was. That's why I think right now what he's going through, I think this is truly a conversion for him. I think he's at that moment. Joe alluded to St. Augustine. I think the line was, Lord, make me chaste, but not yet. Okay. I want to give full disclosure. Okay. I understand completely. And I spoke to my wife before ever doing the Frontline with Joe and Joe, because my wife knew everything about me going into our marriage. Okay. And to say there are certain stories I will tell about my life in full disclosure, because I think they may be able to be helpful to make an illustration. Okay. Because a lot of people listen to Joe and I say, you're just going after the gay guy. No, we're not. We're talking about in general, let's say a conversion of one's life. Okay. I was St. Augustine. I knew in my heart in my 30s, I knew in my heart every time I passed St. Peter's in Parsippany, New Jersey, that I was supposed to go into that church and go to confession. In my heart, I knew it, and I didn't want to do it. And why? Because I was living the lifestyle of the sexually liberated. Okay, the going out, trying to score the chicks, getting drunk, all that kind of stuff. I didn't want to go to confession.
You didn't want to change.
But that's the thing. But in the case when you have that tug, like Milo, obviously, I did. Okay. And then God got my head on straight. Okay. And I met my wife. God brought my wife into my life and we got married. And the rest is, as they say, history. Milo is at that point, it seems. He's at that point where he's saying now, he's going, I don't want to do this anymore. And we have to, I think, pray for him. Oh, absolutely pray for him.
He's a baptized Catholic.
Yeah.
That's number one. I mean, but number two, he's a human being. We have to love everybody, not just Catholics. You got to pray for the guy.
Yeah.
I mean, he's trying. He's trying. Listen, nobody's perfect in this life. Mm-hmm. Nobody is perfect.
Right.
And he is trying. And like I said, what makes him different is he acknowledges the fact that he's living a sinful life. You see, this is something that the culture is telling you can't do. They're basically saying that sin doesn't exist, whether heterosexual sin or homosexual sin. They tell you that doesn't exist. That's not true. That's simply not true. That is a lie. And believe me, we all have to deal with that one day when we stand before God. So, I mean, the time to think about that is now while you're still breathing. And
I want to just give Michael a quick shout out. Hey, Michael, how are you? Michael gets in the chat room. He says, Milo is exposing the hypocrisy of the Pope and the bishops. I'm just going to go one step below that. You just reminded me of something, Michael. Well, what he is doing is he's exposing the error of Father James Martin. Okay, because Joe and I have said on this show for a long time, Father James Martin, okay, he's a very intelligent man. There's no question about that. Okay, he's a very educated man. And Father Martin knows what he's doing. See, I haven't heard anything from Father Martin yet about all of this. Okay. But see, Milo blows up Father Martin's narrative.
But I wouldn't agree with that. I want to go on record. I don't agree with that statement. Just for the record.
Okay.
That man, just for the record.
Okay.
There are people who basically may believe that. I don't believe that. There are bishops that potentially, but the overwhelming majority of bishops, I don't believe that. I'm sorry.
Yeah, there may be a couple, let's say, but yeah, the fact is that I mean I haven't, except for a handful, or let's say a Father Martin, who's let's say most. Well, that statement reminded me of Father Martin. That's why I brought it up.
Yeah, I mean, but in terms of like Milo, he says my own life has changed dramatically, though it crept on me while I was praying and I wasn't paying attention. If anyone who responds to micromanagement, it's me. So I've been counting days. I've been counting the days against this sin, and he said he's went 250 days and he only slipped once, which is a lot better than I predicted. So he's trying.
One thing I was talking to my wife about, because we were before I came over to do the show, is the one thing I would tell Milo is this, okay, is he also, it's very difficult. You're dealing with something that he himself calls an addiction. Okay, he himself is describing this as an addiction. Okay, it's like the single guy who's addicted to going out and trying to score every chick he can. He's addicted to that lifestyle. You cannot be in a situation where you're in a near occasion of sin. And Milo right now is still living with the guy who basically he calls his housemate. If I had to give Milo any advice, I would say, brother, you got to get out of that situation. That's way too tempting. I'm sorry. Yeah. I don't care who you are. I don't care if you think you're Superman in let's say overcoming your obstacles. Brother Milo, that's a bad situation to be in, because the temptation is there as soon as you open your eyes in the morning. It's not good.
Well, that's why priests shouldn't, to be honest with you, and many popes have said it, including Francis, that homosexual men shouldn't be priests, because it is a temptation. You're living with men. Mm-hmm. It's a temptation. They should not be priests. By the way, John Paul II said that. Benedict, this is, I could go straight down the line to John the 23rd. So I mean, it's a fact. Mm-hmm. Like, not only that, but to Joe's point, but that takes time. Listen, it's like with any sin. Sin is a dead end road, whether it's heterosexual sin or homosexual sin. It doesn't matter. It's a dead end, and it's meant to be a dead end, because all of us were created to be with God. That's a fact. All of us. Mm-hmm. And he has come to the end of himself.
That's the best way to put it. And it's great, because when you come to the end of yourself, that's where the good Lord takes you from there. I will say, Red Hat Duck, what's up there? Red Hat Duck says everyone has to avoid the near occasion of sin. Absolutely right. Would you tell, if somebody said to you, I've been an alcoholic for 20 years, okay, would you think if that person said, yeah, I'm going to go to the bar and hang out with my friends, but I'm just going to drink club soda, you're going to say, dude, that's a really bad idea. You don't want to be around, because the thing comes into your head that says, all right, I'll just have one. And before you know it, you've had 10 and you're blotto. And then you're regretting it the next day. Okay. I will say this, because, Joe and I, who get angry on the show all the time, but we do like to laugh. Okay. I like Milo's humor. I really do. Because one thing that they really don't like about him, particularly the people that hate him, is that he has the ability to laugh at them. He's good at that. He's actually good at helping others to laugh at them too. Here's what he said. He said, it feels as though a veil has been lifted in my house. Like there's something more real and honest going on than before. It's a gradual uncovering rather than a dramatic reveal. Maybe the lack of theater or spectacle is a sign that the gay impulses truly are receding. See, he's able to make fun of himself. He's probably a 30-something. My guess is he's a 30, but he had the ability to laugh at himself. You know what I mean? He takes it all seriously. But you gotta have a joyful, like something strikes me that he's got a joyful heart, even though he's struggling. But we all struggle. We all try to maintain a joyful heart. I think he's maintaining a joyful heart. When he says something like that, I gotta kind of laugh.
No, I give him credit. He's a brave man, and to be honest with you, I think he's an example for us all, because we all hold on to certain sins. I mean, this is Lent, obviously, and Lent is a time to change. Mm-hmm. I mean, that's the way. Conversion is constant. It's never over. No one's perfect. I mean, the onion is constantly being peeled. And we all have to look at ourselves. That's why, to be truthful with you, a good practice is before you go to bed, examine your day. Examine your day. Mm-hmm. It's not confession, but you could say to yourself, what did I do? First, before you go to bed, say to yourself, what was great about this day? Thank God. Whoa, I have my family. I had a good meal. I'm healthy. And then say, well, what did I do wrong? Well, I was rude in that particular situation. I was driving. I lost my patience.
You just described me every day.
No, but I'm just saying, but it keeps you accountable. This is just on a more practical level, not like big things, but just on regular level. Every day we should do that before we go to sleep. It's a good practice.
As you said earlier, that he mentioned, and you just mentioned it, okay? Accountability. We all have to acknowledge that we're all accountable. We are all accountable. You just said it. Milo just said it. Great practice, by the way. That's an Exodus 90 thing. That's a central thing in Exodus 90 is examine your conscience every day. And one of my brothers, my fraternity brothers in Exodus 90 said, I said, well, how do you do that? What you're suggesting? He said, what you just said. He goes, think about the things you're grateful for. Think about the things that you let's say, could have done better or did wrong, and make the adjustment the next day. And that's something that we recommend. But obviously, more than anything else, we know that when we come on our show at night on Sunday nights, obviously we want to reach a much wider audience of people, but we know we're talking to primarily Roman Catholics. Okay, pray for this guy.
Oh, absolutely.
Pray for this guy.
Pray for me.
All right. Yeah, please. Well, we know you pray for us because we've been successful. So you definitely are praying for us. Pray for Milo. You know what? There's some people that we'll end it here. There's some people that are detracting, not necessarily on the left. Okay. They're saying they don't believe him. They think he's a showman. They think he's a little bit, because he's always looking for attention or whatever the case might be. They're not necessarily believing this is authentic. I'm going to err on the side of, somebody mentioned in the chat room, he's the prodigal son. He realizes he's been eating the food that he's been feeding the pigs, and he's on his way home to his father's house. We need to pray for a speedy journey back home for Milo Yiannopoulos.
So let's go to Jordan Peterson. This is a great article by Kennedy Hall in Crisis Magazine. He basically says, has Peterson finally found Christ? For those who don't know who Peterson is, basically he is, locally known, particularly in Canada. He's Canadian. Am I
Canadian,
correct?
Yep. He's got that Canadian accent too. Like
he's got he what's it called? He says A.
Yeah. No, once in a while you hear him say A.
I'll drop that out there. He's basically, gets like tons and tons and views on YouTube. I mean, he's like one of those guys that people listen to. He's very, very intelligent. And this has been going on since 2016.
Mm-hmm.
Well, recently, in a podcast, this is what he had to say to a friend of his who was Orthodox. He's talking about C.S. Lewis. He says, C.S. Lewis pointed this out, that the difference between Christ and the mythological gods was that there is a representation, a historical representation of Christ as well. You can debate whether or not this is genuine. There is still a historical story, an actual person who actually lived. The problem is, I probably believe that, but I don't know. I'm amazed at my own belief, and I don't understand it. I believe it's undeniable. The objective world and the narrative world touch. I have seen this many times, and the ultimate example of that is supposed to be Christ. And that seems to me oddly plausible. I still don't know what to make of it. And this is the important part right here. Partly because it is too terrifying of a reality to fully believe. I don't know what would happen to me if you believe it.
Joe does. Joe knows what would happen to you.
This is the thing. And that's the point here. When you don't believe in God, okay, and the reality of God shows himself, it scares you. That's why throughout scripture, even Moses was scared. Moses was a holy guy. You know what I mean? He saw God. He was terrified. The three apostles at the Transfiguration, John, James, and Peter, this was the trifecta. That was his inner circle. They were scared. Why? Because he's perfect. You see, God is perfect. And when you stand in front of him, you see your own flaws. And that's why they were scared.
Mm-hmm.
Well, he's scared because basically, if you're living a life that's basically the antithesis of God, and that reality is shown to you clearly, it's going to scare you because that means you're living a lie. That means you're living a lie. And that's the point where a lot of people come to and refuse to change because it's too scary. They don't either have the courage or want to take those steps because their whole world is going to get turned upside down. On the other side, you take a guy like Milo. He's willing to do it. You take a guy like Scott Hahn, who was basically a Protestant minister his whole life, all his friendships, everything, and he left it. You see, that's the difference. And I love the fact that he says that honestly, because God expects us to change. The analogy I've always used is like when you get married, say you're single and you're living in your house and you have an old chair and you love the chair. It's got cigarette butts. You put it out on the chair. It smells of smoke. It smells of beer. It's dirty. And your wife comes in and she says, listen, you got to get rid of that chair. And you're like, honey, I love that chair. And you're like, she's like, you got to get rid of that chair.
Because it smells like smoke and beers.
Right. So what do? You get rid of it. Why? Because you love your wife. Well, God does that to us. You know, that's what he does. He comes into our life and he basically says, listen, you got to get rid of that. You have to get rid of that. And we take steps along the way. I'll be honest with you. I'm 50. I changed my life radically at 22. I was a party guy. Changed. I was a very popular guy. Changed my whole life. Like I don't even recognize myself how I was. And why I even bring that up is along the way, there were things that happened that God presented me with choices. I'll tell you one. One that I struggled with, tithing. Started to make a little bit of money. I was single, you know, working at Morgan Stanley. I'm single, making money. And God, it was heavy on top of me. Joe, you got to give some of that away. You got to give it away. I didn't want to. I met someone in an airport in Norfolk, Virginia, and she was a Protestant and a Marine. And she told me that we were just chatting because our plane was delayed. And she said, when I retire from the Marines, I'm going to give, because I have a job, I'm going to give away my Marine salary to charity. That's what changed me. I'll be honest with you. That put me over the edge. But for a time, God put that person in my life. It was heavy on top of me because I knew I had to do it. I don't want to bore you, but I'm just saying God gives you steps. You know, none of us are perfect. Before you start pointing the finger at Milo and saying, oh, he's this or he's that, or Jordan Peterson is this or he's that. Well, are you God? Many times we compare ourselves to the person who's flawed. Compare yourself to Mother Teresa. Compare yourself to the Blessed Mother. Compare yourself to Jesus. We fall short. All of us do. We're all sinners. But God, because he loves us, he doesn't just throw you in the pool. It's slow. But when you come to that point, that thing, you got to change.
Well, the thing is, too, and Kennedy Hall mentioned this, all right, because you mentioned about the Marine, okay, and obviously that woman gave you an example and triggered something in you to say, all right, let me do that. I forgot who is in chat. By the way, just so everybody knows, we can't, unfortunately, we love you to death. I can't keep track of every comment. I try to get to some.
We get hundreds.
Right? We get hundreds of them. And, you know, so GH, I know you're out there. I'm sorry. I missed your comment. I apologize, but we don't deliberately avoid talking about things. But when we see something, we'll point it out. So I apologize for that, but please stick with us, brother. We love you. But Kennedy Hall was talking about, or somebody mentioned St. Augustine in the chat room. Joe mentioned St. Augustine. Kennedy Hall mentioned St. Augustine because it's like you're talking about, okay? There are people who any Roman Catholic, any Protestant too. Remember, there's a lot of Protestants out there that obviously value St. Augustine, okay? Martin Luther King quoted St. Augustine in his letters from a Birmingham jail, okay? So St. Augustine's a weighty figure, not just for Catholics, but for Protestants too. St. Augustine was a heretic. St. Augustine was a Manichaean. Okay. Aside from, like Joe said, he had a gumad and all that kind of stuff and a kid out of wedlock. Okay. He was a heretic who St. Ambrose stayed on top of the same way you saw that woman who triggered something in you. St. Ambrose stayed on top of St. Augustine, all right, and eventually St. Augustine, obviously, because St. Augustine was in North Africa. He was in the hotbed of heresy. Okay. Very easy to fall into that. But God had patience with St. Augustine and sent someone to help him. We talked about Milo Yiannopoulos. Milo Yiannopoulos had a conversation with Michael Voris, who came out like 2 or 3 years ago that he lived a homosexual lifestyle. And again, that could have been the trigger that God put in Milo's way to get him to really try to make a decision, the same way he does with a lot of us, okay? In the same way with Jordan Peterson. Jordan Peterson has now been talking to, well, he's talking to people of many religions, okay, and people of no religion, okay? He still believes in evolution. He still looks at, let's say, scripture from a psychological point of view. I drove home from Washington, D.C. last night. I listened to his whole lecture. It's a biblical series. I listened to the whole thing on Cain and Abel. Okay, very interesting, but from a purely psychological point of view. Okay. He doesn't dismiss it, and he actually comes down on atheists for dismissing biblical stories, but he doesn't look at them the way we do. Let's say, like, at, you know, either in the beginning or at some point in his actual history. Okay. But nonetheless, he doesn't dismiss it, and he gives it a tremendous amount of value. Those things are weighing on him. That's why, and along the lines of what Joe said, well, I love the way he said this, by the way. I thought this was a fascinating thing that he said. He was talking to Jonathan Pajot, who's a friend of his, and Jonathan Pajot's actually Orthodox. He's not Catholic. And he said, I thought, quote, I thought, this is Peterson, I suppose it's a form of comedy that Catholicism is as sane as people get. That's a pretty strong statement coming from a guy who has basically treated religion with respect, but never kind of went over the edge. He's saying that Catholicism, and he didn't say just Christianity, by the way. He said Catholicism is pretty much as sane as it gets. And it's as Joe said, and then he's humble enough to say, this is where humility comes in. He's humble enough to openly say, it's a terrifying thought to me. It's a terrifying thought to me.
Well, think about this for a second. Say you lived your whole life like the absolute opposite of what the church teaches. Everything. You lived a completely secular, worldly, consumeristic life. And then all of a sudden you died and you stand before God and he says, everything about the Catholic Church is right. Would you be scared? I would be. It would scare the hell out of you.
I'd be trembling.
Well, but I mean, like, that we believe as Catholics, this is the church believes, the people in the church are flawed. There's everybody.
Yeah,
we're all
looking
sinners.
at two of them here.
Everybody. But the church is perfect. What does that mean? The teachings of the church are perfect. If you read the church by the numbers, you read about it. That's why many people, if they read like to the early fathers of the church, what they would discover. I watch The Journey Home, Marcus Grodi. For years, I watched it on Monday nights. All types of people, atheists, Mormons, Protestants, you name it, Jehovah's Witnesses. If you read, you could read yourself into the church, because what you find is it's Catholic. The church is Catholic, and it's truth. And there are many people like Teresa of Avila, who was an atheist, who, like Milo, was humble.
She was an athist?
She was.
I never knew that about her.
She read a book on I'm sorry, not Teresa of Avila. What's her name? Teresa of the Cross, Benedictine of the Cross, Stein.
Oh, Edith Stein.
Edith Stein was an atheist. She read a book on Teresa of Avila, and because she was bored, she finished the book, she put it down, and she just said, "This is the truth," because she was humble.
Right.
That's same with Milo. He's humble.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Peterson, he's humble. He's acknowledging something.
Yes.
But it scares him because it requires change. You see, if we're not, Padre Pio said this, if we're not moving forward, we're moving backwards. You see, we have to constantly change, because we're not perfect yet. That's why there's purgatory, because we're not usually, most people don't die perfect. Very few. There's been only one assumption. The Blessed Mother, she was perfect. She was assumed into heaven. Well, we're not. So there's that cleansing period too. But we want to get there as close as possible. That's the name of the game, because that's, you'll do as much good on this earth. But getting back to Peterson, it scares him. I love that statement. We should all look to that. We should all be, to be honest with you. That's why we got to look to, our sin should scare us, and we should look to change.
I would want to end this conversation on Milo and Jordan Peterson this way. I think that on one level, because we are in such a dark and nasty, what the Catechism calls a dour combat with the forces of evil. And if people don't think that you're seeing that front and center in 2021 and see the pedal to the metal as far as a lot of the evils out there that we are confronting, a St. Paul moment would be very great. I've been praying for a lot of people, like a Bernard Nathanson. We always bring him up on the show, who championed abortion and then converted from his pro-abortion position and the fact that he committed thousands of abortions to being pro-life and then converting to the Catholic Church. I think he died in 2011. That's a St. Paul moment, okay? You'll never know the people that actually converted because they saw him convert. Same thing with Milo. Milo is able to put this down, especially God willing, he comes out and he's got a girlfriend and he says, I'm going to get married, okay? There's going to be, particularly amongst, let's say, same-sex attracted Catholics, a lot of people that are going to look in the mirror because of that, God willing, okay? Because that's what a St. Paul moment is. I know one of the reasons I came into the church was because of St. Paul, okay? So St. Paul moments are important. The same with Jordan Peterson. So I'm going to admit a certain level of selfishness, okay? But I would say this, and we mentioned that this came from an article written by Kennedy Hall. Kennedy's awesome. I watch him online all the time. And this was an article in Crisis Magazine. I think this is the most important thing.
I agree. Actually, I was going to bring this.
He said, and this is for all of us to know, and then we'll move on. When men like Peterson seem on the cusp of converting to Christ, we are quick to think of what they might offer to the church in her efforts to convert the world. This is understandable, but perhaps we should look at it the other way. Let us not think of what Peterson could offer the church, but instead what the church could offer him, the salvation of his soul, of his soul. Would God do that Jordan Peterson embraces Christ in all his glory and becomes a son of the church that the Son of God left to Peter? What's the net? It would be a beautiful, wonderful thing, and only God knows how many conversions it would create. Our job right now, pray for both these guys. And Jordan Peterson and Milo Yiannopoulos, let's offer a good fast would be a really good idea, okay? And generally praying our rosaries for the intention of their conversion.
But I want to get for a minute why Kennedy Hall said that. Well, he's saying this, obviously, he's a gifted guy, right? But who's more gifted than God? That's number one. But number two, salvation is found in the Catholic Church. This is a teaching of the Catholic Church. It's in the Catechism. We're saved by two things, baptism and the church. Why? Because we're born with original sin. Baptism takes that away. And then why? The church, because we continue to sin. See, that's where I disagree with the Protestants, because just to say you believe in Christ doesn't reconcile you. You have to reconcile yourself to his church. And only through a priest does that occur. You see, we sin. To be a practicing Catholic, you have to go to confession at least once a year at the minimum to be considered. That's in the Catechism too. So the church, you can't, many people try to separate the church from Christ. Jesus would tell you different. So does the church. You can't take the head away from the body. And that's what Kennedy Hall is saying by that. He's saying, yes, he's a gifted man and he could do great things for the church. However, the church is the hospital to save his soul, to save all our souls.
And he's sick, by the way. Just so we're clear, Jordan Peterson is sick. He said in the interview with Jonathan Pajot, he's in constant pain. Okay. He went to Russia for treatment because they had a particularly, what was called, from my understanding, an obscure treatment for his cancer. And this man's in pain. All right. And in his pain and suffering, he's not shying away from God. He's moving towards God. God bless him. God bless. So let's move on. You're at the front line. Now, that I think was a kind of more of a heart-to-heart conversation. Now it's time to get angry, okay? This is why we know a lot of you come to the front line with Joe and Joe. Just a quick shout-out. A couple of our regulars are here. Tom Gugliotta, Michael Getz here, Paula Ann, Sean Marie. What the heck? What the heck? I love that. And a whole bunch of others. Marilyn. So we love you guys. I know I can't get to everybody. But now we got to talk. Now, Joe and I, as I said at the top of the show, we are now on Veritas Catholic Network, and we just did an interview with Bill Donahue, and we broke down. I'm going to see if I can get permission for that once it's aired. Now that it's aired, if we can put that on our social media, because it is a video and audio, even though it was done on audio for obviously the radio. However, okay, there's a couple things that we want to talk about real quick to just go along the surface and what some of you need to know about this so-called Equality Act, okay? And there is, I think, okay, there is a organized and unifying response coming from the bishops, because when you talk about what we spoke about these two men, Milo and Jordan Peterson, who recognize the evils in the world, okay, this Equality Act embodies everything we're up against. And that's not an exaggeration. That is not. And in the interview with Donahue, we got into a lot of it, but we're going to get into it with some of it with you guys tonight.
Well, there's a bishop in Toledo, Ohio. His name is Daniel Thomas. And he said that the so-called, as Joe said, it's a Trojan horse that would jeopardize unborn babies' lives and religious freedom for millions of Americans. Thomas warned that the legislation would do the opposite of what it claims to do. It's going to discriminate, particularly about people of all faiths, not just Catholics, Jewish people, Protestants, Muslim people. It will discriminate. Here's some more clarity given by the good bishop. He said, in effect, the Equality Act discriminates against people of faith. It serves as a Trojan horse to promote a pro-abortion agenda and impose gender ideologies that dismiss the truth and beauty of male and female complementarity and the very nature of a human person. Among other things, Thomas said the bill would be used to force taxpayers to fund the killing of unborn babies in abortions and mandate that doctors and nurses do abortions in violation of their conscience, to force them. Okay, that's just a touch. We could go on. We could talk about this forever. I think the thing that I basically just want to touch on, and this is what we talked a little bit about with Bill Donahue, the equality, the name is deceptive. And that's what I think Thomas is focusing on. It's a discrimination against people of faith. And what the bill does, that's the most nefarious, if you ask me, there was a 1993 rule, Religious Restoration Act, which basically protects religious beliefs from something like what we just talked about, like conscience protection. You could have the right to say, I believe in traditional marriage. Why? Because I'm Catholic, and Catholics believe in traditional marriage. So do Jews. So do Muslims. It's a pervasive idea across the globe. It is. Right. It's not just my idea. It's pervasive.
Well, Bill Donahue did point out, he mentioned not only, let's say, for argument's sake, practicing Roman Catholics, conservative Protestants, he mentioned conservative Muslims, Mormons, and Orthodox Jews. He said that coalition of people defeated Proposition 8, the proposition on gay marriage in California. But what was that, 7 or 8 years ago? In California. So the thing is, this is affecting all of us. If there was ever a time, I know the reason why I wanted to bring it up is, if there's ever a time for people, let's say, I know a lot of people don't like false ecumenism, and Joe and I don't go for that either, okay? But if the forces of evil win in this whole thing, particularly when it comes to free speech, okay, you're not going to be able to talk. If you're a Catholic and you want to convert a Jew, you're not going to be able to even talk about God. If you're a Muslim and you think you're going to convert an atheist, okay, the government's not going to even allow you to talk about God. If we don't defeat the nihilist Marxists, okay, on the left, we're not even going to be able to have these conversations. So we might as well come together now for the purpose of defeating them when it comes to free speech and protecting conscious rights. Okay. Aside from the obvious fact that we need to protect babies from being slaughtered, sure, okay, and men from going into girls' locker rooms and showers, okay, yeah, those are the practical things we have to defeat. But as far as free speech and conscience rights, can you imagine? Listen, I know this is going to be shocking to a lot of people on the left. There are atheists out there that will not perform an abortion. There are.
I believe that.
Are they going to force the atheist to have to perform an abortion? If that atheist is a doctor or I'm sure they will. Okay. And what's going to be the argument to them? The atheist is going to say, well, listen, I might be pro-choice, but I'm not performing an abortion. I'm not. Okay. So, you can't force me to. Again, this has nothing to do with solely being a Roman Catholic. If you're against any of this, take an atheist father who voted for Joe Biden. All right. I think I may be very well describing somebody out there. An atheist father of a 14-year-old freshman daughter who's on the soccer team at her public high school, and he voted for Joe Biden. I'd ask that guy, if you vote for this, the 17-year-old male senior, okay, who thinks he's a girl can now go into your daughter's dressing room, locker room, and in the shower. Are you for that?
The answer would be no. And I'll be honest with you, that is where they overplayed their hand, because they brought people into this that wouldn't be in the conversation, because a lot of people don't care about abortion. I could recall a friend of mine, he's very worldly, and he said to me, abort away, I'm not paying for it. You see, that's like a lot of people don't care because basically their care is to their front door. If it doesn't affect them, they don't care. That's how a lot of people operate in America. Let's be honest. That's the truth. But the sports thing touches people in a place that basically the Democrats shouldn't have went, because they're the indifferent guy or woman who's not going to get into the culture war because frankly, they don't care. They care about making money. There's tons of people like that. They want to make money and that's it. But I don't want my daughter showering with a boy. And any right-minded adult at 14 would say that. Well, any right-minded adult, and I'm sorry if you think otherwise. Well, we don't have much common ground to talk about. I don't understand that.
Doesn't that person then have to make a decision? That person, let's call that person a fence sitter. Okay, we've said before on the front line with Joe Pasillo and Joe Resino. We've said before in this culture war. I hate to break it to you, you're not sitting on the fence. It's not going to be allowed. See, Joe and I are very tolerant. We say, well, if you want to sit on the fence, sit on the fence. Okay. The left, they're not having that. And my thing to that fence sitter is do you think that's going to be an inciting event for you to get into this culture war? Because now it's going to be your little girl that's going to be exposed to someone who has a mental illness. Let's be clear. Okay. Let's not parse words here. Someone who has a mental illness, who is older and stronger, being in her locker room and naked and in her shower. I'm gonna go out on a limb. I'm gonna go out on a limb. You ain't sitting on that fence. And you can forget about, Joe and I brought up a few weeks ago on the Crusade channel. When you get the two daughters, 14-year-old daughters of John Fatanyats, okay, and Bruno Boujad, okay, from suburban Essex County, okay, whose family grew up in Newark, and they grew up in Newark, and now they live in West Orange or Verona or Roseland, okay, and their daughters go to public school. Guess what? Fatanyats and Bruno Boujad, you tell them that boy is in their girls' locker room, I wouldn't want to be the principal of that school. When those guys, who are not indifferent in this, say, you're not doing that to my daughter. You're not exposing my daughter to your social engineering, okay, and we're going to stop this. The first way we have to stop this is pressuring. We talked to Bill Donahue about applying pressure on our public officials, on our congressmen and our senators, because it works. Bill Donahue's been doing it for decades. He makes it happen, okay, because he's fighting for the civil rights of Catholics, but many other religious people where there's overlap in what we believe on these issues, okay? Public pressure works. We need to put public pressure. Okay, we're in New Jersey. Send an email to Cory Booker. What is he going to do? He's going to do like Don Cheech in The Godfather. He's going to go, he doesn't care. Okay. But if you're in a purple state, if you're in a state that could either vote Republican or Democrat, let's say a state like Indiana has voted for Democrat senators, Missouri had Claire McCaskill, Montana's got John Tester, Arizona's now got 2 Democrat senators. I'm not convinced Arizona is a blue state. Okay. Then you need to put pressure on those people and say that this you're voting against. They don't want any compromise on this, people. The left, this is a wish list for them, Joe. It's a wish list. And it goes beyond, like we said, it goes beyond abortion. It goes beyond, it goes to free speech. It goes to conscience rights. It goes to public school education, what they're going to teach. It's a whole wish list. It's an evil, evil bill. It needs to be defeated. I agree. And Bishop Thomas, all right, along with many other bishops. Absolutely. Let's be fair. There's many times where the bishops let us down. Not on this. No, not on this.
This is glaring. It's glaring. And frankly, to the point that Joe made with regard to our interview with Bill, a lot of people don't know what's in it. That's why you have to be informed and you have to read about these things. And don't be deceived by the title, Equality Act. Look a little deeper here. There's a lot of nefarious aspects of that. And listen, we respect everybody. Listen, if you want to do that transition as an adult, if that's what you want to do, I mean, I don't advise that you do it, but that's your business. You have free will. Don't impose yourself on me. I don't impose myself on you, to be honest with you. I really don't. Catholics shouldn't anyway. We propose Christ. We don't impose. I don't impose my life on you. You shouldn't, and the government should not impose itself on me and my family. And there's many people like me. It's not just Catholics, it's Jews, it's the Nation of Islam, it's mainstream Protestants, it's Mormons. It's a big list.
Well, we covered the Jews down in Lakewood. Okay. In other words, that's an Orthodox Jewish community in Lakewood, New Jersey. They came out very forcefully, very openly and aggressively against this agenda, in the whole LGBT agenda in their public schools. Okay. And they were threatened. If Joe and I did that to any, let's say, secular Jew, we'd be called anti-Semites. But the left could seem to do it to these Orthodox Jews, and nobody said boo. In other words, and they got vandalized in their neighborhood.
Yeah, they
went
their cars. They screwed around with
if we did that, they'd call it a pogrom.
It's a hate crime.
Or a hate crime. But see, if you're the left, you can get away with anything. And we're going to get into that, too, because we're going to talk about Andy Nago. Okay? You're the left. You get away with anything. You could beat up a Jew. You could beat up a homosexual. You could beat up a black guy. If you're a leftist, you have carte blanche to beat the crap out of anybody you want. You have carte blanche to vandalize a group of Orthodox Jews in Lakewood, New Jersey, because they disagree with gender ideology. They disagree with gay marriage. They're having none of this. None whatsoever. We must put pressure. We don't think, let's talk politics for a second. We don't think the Equality Act is going to pass. Okay? You would need to end the filibuster, and Joe Manchin has said he's not interested in ending the filibuster.
Believe it or not, Biden even said it.
Right.
I've even heard him say, not that he's
got any power
or has any friggin' credibility.
Right. But senator-wise, it's going to be difficult. But here's my problem. Here's my fear, if you want to call it that. It's not going to be impossible for them to end the filibuster. And if they do end the filibuster, okay, the Equality Act becomes law, and then we're all toast. Okay. By the way, Buswell Life is in the chat room. He said the culture war has. I love the way he put it. He said the culture war has burned down the fence. No more fence sitting. I think that's a great way of putting it.
Well, ultimately, I think in the end, God will prevail. Obviously, we know that. It's funny. Today at Mass, like my wife and I were talking about the readings. The first reading basically talked about the people of Israel, how they veered, and God kept telling them truth, right? Truth, kept telling them, sending the prophets. They didn't listen. So what happened? He allowed the Babylonians to capture them and to kill them and to enslave them for 70 years until the Phoenicians took over. For 70 years. And I was telling my wife, I actually think that this is what's going to happen that's going to bring us back. Because sadly, it's sad. We don't listen. St. Paul says this. He says we're a stiff-necked people. We don't listen. We don't listen.
Right.
And it rang every once in a while, like a reading. I read it in the morning, and then I was at Mass, and I said to myself, this is the United States. This is what's going on. God has constantly sent people to America, and we won't listen. So what's going to happen? We're going to be enslaved. And it was 70 years. But then what happened? Things changed. It'll eventually change. I'll be honest with you. With all this, have your day, have your hour, because God will have his day. And this is not going to last because it's built on sand. All of this is nonsense.
Sorry.
I'm telling you that right now. All of this woke crap will pass. It may take 50 years.
We'll all be dead.
It could take
natural or otherwise. We don't know.
It will never, ever, ever amount to a hill of beans.
No,
not a hill of beans.
Mark's in the chat room. He said he kind of like was echoing what you said. Mark Lazamas. Hey, Mark, how you doing, brother? He said the left wants us to believe they can get away with anything, but God will not be knocked. And that's really. But as Joe said, God will have his day.
But people have to listen. This is the sad thing, and this is all of our lives. Sometimes things have to happen to get your attention, right? It's just the way it is. It's like a dad when you have a son. The dad tells, like, because I have 4 kids, I say things constantly. No one listens to me. I say it. They don't listen. But eventually, you're patient. You see, God's patient. People have to learn, and we're going to learn. I have a feeling I think we're going to learn the hard way because people don't want to change. And like I said, the reading rang true. God is forever, Alpha, the Omega. He doesn't change. And frankly, I think this is the way it is. That's my 2 cents. And like I said, it struck me today as the priest was reading. I said, this is what's happening here.
Mm-hmm.
No one wants to listen.
Joe, Lisa's in the chat room. She said, see you in the gulags.
Well, very possible.
We'll see you there.
I mean, we could go. Listen, it's happened in other cultures.
Why can't it happen here?
It could happen
Why
here.
we say on the show all the time, why is America? Why do Americans think that America's exempt from human history? Why do people think, particularly conservatives, think that's never going to happen here? This is America. Are you kidding me? Do you see how close the Equality Act is from being enacted into law? Somebody mentioned the Supreme Court. You got no guarantees with the Supreme Court, not with this Supreme Court. You don't even know if John Roberts would even hear a case that challenged this. We don't even know. Okay. So when people say, like, in other words, like Americans somehow, some way, that this won't happen here. Well, you're living in a bubble, man. You've never read history. All right. There have been very strong countries, okay? In other words, that have fallen. Look at France, which has never fully recovered from the French Revolution.
How many saints came from France?
Right. You're talking about nations and empires going down in flames. And what, America is exempt? Hey, listen, I look at it this way. If the Roman Empire can fall after 1,000 years, okay, America is no Roman Empire. America could fall after 200 and some odd years like nothing. So let's move on. You want to move on?
Yeah.
We're at the front line with Joe and Joe. Joe Pasillo, Joe Resinello, way in the breach. Now, here's the thing. You know why cancel culture is prevalent? Because people allow themselves to be canceled. And that's what we're going to talk about right now.
This is a great story, actually, I thought. Basically, Mumford & Sons, they're a popular band.
I never heard of them, by the way. I just never heard of them. It sounds like when I hear Mumford & Sons, I think Sanford & Sons. I think Red Fox. I know I'm off in that, but
they're fairly new. They have guitar, banjo type of thing. Well, the guy, he's a banjoist and a guitarist. His name is Winston Marshall, and he basically was on Twitter and he apologized for praising the journalist Andy Ngo. We've covered him a lot on our show. He has a new book out, and he basically took to exposing the far left movement, Antifa, basically saying that they're violent, and he praised it, and then he got some pushback.
You're saying Marshall praised Andy Ngo's book, okay?
And then got some pushback. We talked about this on a previous show. Obviously, Ngo's done a lot of work in Portland, Oregon, and there's a famous bookstore in Portland. It's called Powell's, and I wanted to bring this up because I laugh at this. They wouldn't put the book on the shelf, but they would sell it online. Why? Because they care about money.
Right.
And they know it's going to sell. Just shows you how deep their belief in the woke culture is. Let me just make that note. But this is what he basically said, his quote on Twitter.
By the way, this is sickening. I read the quote Joe's about to read to you made me sick that someone who would probably describe themselves as a male of the species, okay, would make this statement. Please read it, Joe.
He says, over the past few days, I have come to better understand the pain caused by the book I endorsed. I have offended not only a lot of people I don't know, but also those closest to me, including my bandmates. And for that, I am truly sorry. As a result of my actions, I am taking time away from the band to examine my blind spots, whatever that means. For now, please know that I realize how my endorsements have the potential to be viewed as approvals of hatred and diversive behavior. I don't get that. And I apologize, as this was not my intention. Obviously, listen, he, and we're going to talk about Ngo's response to that. Obviously, he read something that frankly is true. Andy Ngo is a gay guy, to be honest with you. And he was beat up by Antifa, and Antifa has been violent.
I was going to say, this guy's apologizing for offending Antifa. Andy Ngo's a homosexual.
And got beat up.
And the video's online. He beat the crap out of this poor kid. He is not a big guy, Andy Ngo. He had to go to the hospital because he had
staples in his head.
He had staples in his head. He had brain trauma.
He had to flee the country. Right. He's in England.
He's in England. And this coward is worried about offending Antifa? Let me explain something to you. We started today talking about Milo Yiannopoulos, okay? But see, and I have a larger point here, okay? Milo Yiannopoulos was on Bill Maher. This was a couple years ago. And a black guy, a black leftist, when Milo said something, because Milo's a bomb dropper, let's face it. But when he was on Bill Maher, actually, he was not necessarily doing that. He was actually addressing the questions and concerns of Bill Maher and his panel of people. This guy, this black liberal who says we can't beat up homosexuals, Milo said something. He says, you know what I'm going to tell you? Go F yourself. Now, I'm bringing this up for a point, to make a larger point. Okay. So this is a liberal who told a homosexual to go and F yourself. Andy Ngo goes into a square, I believe it was in Portland, and got the crap beat out of him.
He's a brave guy.
Okay, very brave guy. Got the crap beat out of him by leftist thugs, Antifa, okay? Brain damage, as Joe said, staples in his head. The homosexuals, the leftist homosexuals didn't say anything. The leftist homosexuals didn't say anything about this black guy attacking Milo by telling him to go F himself, okay? Didn't say anything about Andy Ngo getting the crap beat out of him by Antifa. Okay, didn't say a word, but I guarantee you this. If I, in the street, punch Dan Savage, who is a savage, he's a savage homosexual leftist, okay? If I punched him in the face, I go to jail. I would never punch him in the face. Let's be clear. I'm just illustrating the point. If I assaulted that man, because we all of us, chat room, all of us, everybody out there have to remember something, okay? They're not homosexuals first. They're leftists first. Same with the black liberal establishment. They don't care if you attack Clarence Thomas. You could attack Thomas Sowell, all black conservatives. Okay, they don't care. Okay, because they only care when you attack leftist black people. Same with the feminists. Look what they did to Sarah Palin years ago. They don't care if you attack women. Don't attack leftist women. People need to get it through their heads. They all the intersectionality and the identity politics. They're only worried if you're a woman, if you're a leftist, if you're gay, if you're a leftist, if you're black, if you're a leftist, if you're Hispanic, if you're a leftist. If you're a leftist, don't criticize them. Certainly don't curse at them, and by all means, don't do anything violent to them. Okay, but if you're a conservative and you fall into any of those groups, it's open season on you. That's the hypocrisy that I wanted to point out, and that we all should point out, by the way. If that black guy could tell Milo Yiannopoulos to go F himself, then I should be able to tell Dan Savage to his face, if I'm ever on Bill Maher, you go F yourself too. Not that I would.
Well,
I'm a good Catholic.
But I'll tell you, I thought he's basically coming out with this statement because basically his bandmates got on him, and this is the market that they basically, try to make money from.
What kind of music is it? Do you know?
It's actually pretty decent.
Is there a particular style?
Like rock.
Okay,
it's new, but it's almost, I don't want to call it like rockabilly. It's almost like
well, this guy plays the banjo, yeah, so I wonder what kind of genre it is.
They have some pretty decent music. Okay. It's like sort of like jam bandish, like sort of like Allman Brothers-esque, but different. But my whole point of the matter is, listen, they're mainstream, and this isn't a popular opinion to hold in mainstream, and it could cost you money. And he folded. Maybe he's sincere. I don't know. You know what I'm saying? And I think Ngo's statement touches on that. He basically says, I grieve. This is what Ngo said. I grieve for those who are made to suffer because they dare to read my work or talk to me. The danger of Antifa and their allies is not only their willingness to carry out the support of maiming, killing, and terrorism, but also how they close curious minds from independent thought. It was very nice, as Joe put it, it's a grace-filled statement. It is. But this guy, to be honest with you, listen, Antifa is not above board. And also keep this in mind, a Harvard-Harris poll, they polled 1,700 registered voters, and 71% of them feel that Antifa, they're domestic terrorists.
Why is that? Because they have eyes and there's YouTube.
Yeah. So
they can look and see what these people have done.
This is not just like, Joe and Joe think that this is like a pervasive idea in America. I mean, outside of you just watching CNN, if you open your eyes a little bit, this is not an above board group.
No.
And it's just a fact. So clearly, the thing is, maybe he's sincere. I don't know. I mean, I don't know. But this is where people have to take a step back. They have to just take a step back.
Well, why
here.
wouldn't Mr. Marshall take a step back and say, okay, his initial, I'm going to go with his initial impulse is how he really feels. Okay?
Maybe.
It's usually that way. The initial impulse is usually how a person feels. And his initial impulse was that he was defending, or he was congratulatory towards the book that was written by a homosexual, Andy Nago, who was beaten up by leftist thugs. He expressed his support for Andy Nago. But it's as Joe said, it always comes down to this. So now Mr. Marshall has to self-examine, okay? He's got to examine himself and say that I now support the leftist thugs who beat the crap out of a homosexual. He better weigh that in his conscience, because no matter what Joe and I think of homosexuality, which we're straight on Catholic about it, okay? Andy Nago, as a human person, did not deserve, or any homosexual deserved, to get what he got in that square in Portland by those thugs.
And he was covering a news event.
Because he's a journalist.
Right. A real one. A real one. And he had to flee the country, as we said earlier in this segment. He's now in England because he was getting death threats. He had to leave the country.
Unbelievable.
So, I mean, right there. I mean, you're apologizing for what? I mean, like, for what? This group basically was making death threats against somebody who wrote a book about what they were doing.
Right.
And you have to apologize for endorsing the book. I mean, Lord. I mean, this is where we're at in this country.
Yes.
I'll be honest with you. This is an example. That's why another reason why I love this story. This is where we have arrived at in America. It's absurd. The things that, like, I'll be honest with you, I can't watch TV anymore.
Oh, no.
I can't. It's sick. And you know something? You'll be better for it. Not because, listen, it's not because I can't believe what I'm seeing.
Mm-hmm.
I can't believe it.
Right.
I don't even recognize the country anymore. And it's not, listen, someone could hear my voice, they'll twist it. Oh, it's because you're a racist and now it's not in your... No. It's stuff like this. Reality. A group of people are hurting people. Listen, you could disagree with me. You don't have a right to hurt me.
That's right.
And I don't have a right to hurt you. And I won't. Trust me. We'll just disagree.
Mm-hmm.
That you can guarantee. We'll just disagree. We can agree to disagree. We have arrived at this point.
Mm-hmm.
It's sad. America is unrecognizable to me right now. It's not because of they're trying to advance the rights of transgender people. Listen, I will always be respectful and give right to everybody.
Of legitimate rights, yes.
But as a human being, you're a human being. I'm going to treat you well. Even if we don't agree, I'm going to treat you well. If you knock on my door and you live next door to me and you need help, I'm helping you.
But you hit the nail on the head. Unless you agree, their attitude is you don't care about them. See, with them, it's acceptance. It's like again, we're talking about the left here. It's about acceptance. You take a rational, reasonable point of view to say, yes, a Catholic point of view, but also an impulse across many faiths, which is to love one's neighbor. Okay. And yours is reasonable. I certainly don't agree with you. I don't have to accept everything that you say. Okay. And I don't have to accept your lifestyle. Yet I am not the threat to you. Okay. I will love you. I will defend you. I would have defended Andy Nago, probably would have gotten the crap beat out of me. Okay. But I wouldn't let a guy who's about 110 pounds soaking wet get the crap beat out of him by a bunch of thugs. I like to think I'm a bit more brave than that. And I would have tried to step in. Okay. And help the guy. But that's not enough for them, Joe. We've said it a million times. You must affirm. You must accept. And if you must, as we said, Dr. Zhivago, adapt yourself. Okay. And if you don't do those things, well, then your reasonable statement that you just made means nothing to them. Unless you completely accept it.
But like I said, this will come and go. It may last 50 years. Who knows? But this is not amounting to a hill of beans. This is all nonsense.
Well, you said built on sand.
It's built on sand.
And somebody in the chat room echoed that and said, absolutely, it gets washed away.
All
it
gone.
Gets washed away.
This is because it's not built on reality.
Right.
I'm sorry. When you're telling me that a 14-year-old girl can transition into a boy, I'm sorry. You could play whatever reality game you want to play with yourself. That's not sticking. No way, no how. Sorry about that. enjoy your hour,
Right?
Because that's all you're gonna get.
Yeah. And let's hope Mr. Marshall. Somebody mentioned the music industry is a meat grinder. It is a meat grinder. Okay. And yeah, I get it. His producer, his bandmates probably said, "Bro, dude,
You can't do that.
can't do that, dude. You know, the Antifa loves us, man." You know, it's like, I don't know if they talk like that, but it's probably like, dude, you know, so you got to come out. You know, frig the homosexual, man. You got to go against them. You got to take it back. We got to make some money. We're going on tour. Got to make another album. Our producer told you we got a contract, man. And plus, we got to live our hard rock and hot lifestyle. So, man, you go out there and you take that back. Mr. Marshall, you ought to examine your conscience. And you should come out and you should apologize to Andy Nago. That's what you should do.
So our last story of the evening is
I'm sad about the story, by the way. I'm sad about this story.
The left is now canceling a cartoon skunk. Sadly, Space Jam 2 announced Pepe Le Pew, the French skunk from Looney Tunes, will no longer appear in the film for his history of sexual inappropriate behavior with female cartoon characters. I actually think these people are the Looney Tunes. This world is insane. This world, I'm telling you, this is craziness.
Joe, it's Pepe Le Pew.
I can't even. I'll be truthful with you. A lot of people are saying this regarding the Dr. Seuss stuff, which we covered on the Crusade channel. That's going to get Donald Trump reelected because it's too far.
Well, what do you always say on all of our platforms? Joe always says the same thing. Okay, and because it's very true. The left is really overplaying their hand. Pepe Le Pew, like you said, Dr. Seuss, Pepe Le Pew, okay, never scores the chick, by the way. Okay, he never gets her. I mean, even I remember like when I was 8 years old because I watched Looney Tunes. Yeah. I was a Looney Tune fan. It was Bugs. It was Pepe Le Pew. It was Daffy Duck. Okay, Yosemite Sam, Foghorn Leghorn, all the Looney, Elmer Fudd. Okay, I loved it all. Pepe Le Pew never got the chick. She got away. She threw the drink in his face and she ran away. And he would come over and it was funny. And I remember when I was a kid, it was funny. Again, one more time, if you have to take out Pepe Le Pew, who's a cartoon character, what does that say about your life? Doesn't say anything about ours. Okay. In other words, and you're taking out a cartoon character. Okay. What does that say about the emptiness of one's life, Joe, that you have to go after Pepe Le Pew?
Well, it's the hypocrisy. What was, Tara Reid accused Joe Biden of basically pushing her up against the wall and basically
violating her.
Yes. And we covered a story that someone in the New York Times, involved with the New York Times, basically said, I agree with her, but I'm voting for Joe Biden anyway. And you have a problem with Pepe Le Pew? You see, this is why, like I said, this is a joke. All of this is a joke. Like, that's something you should care about. Right. And by the way, if that was like, I don't even consider myself a Republican.
No,
I am basically.
God forbid.
No, but I'm just saying, like I don't want people to think like any person who does that. That's horrible, horrible. Like, take politics out of it. They didn't care about that. They didn't even investigate it. The press didn't even cover it. But they're concerned about a skunk. This is why I can't take any of it serious. It's ridiculous. It's embarrassing. And this is where we're at in America. This is the mainstream culture. I don't talk about politics, culture to be honest with you, outside of my family, because to be honest with you, I can't listen to it.
Yeah.
It's insanity. We've got, and you know something, a lot of people think I'll be truthful with you. I think a lot of this is going to come back to bite them, because I think you're basically the average guy that's not some lunatic fringe like person on the left listens to some of this stuff and they're just like, you people are crazy.
But somebody in the chat room said something I think is fine. Said Pepe Le Pew is creepy. Okay. But I'm sure that you don't go out of your way. If you don't like Pepe Le Pew, you don't like Pepe Le Pew, it means you just guess what?
Creepy Joe Biden assaulting Tara Reid.
That's creepy. Yeah.
That's not creepy. That's criminal.
Right. Exactly
that's
right.
Criminal.
Okay, remember something. Look at what Cuomo's going through right now. But here's the thing. If you don't, I'm sure, I forgot who it was in the chat room. If you don't like Pepe Le Pew, I'm sure you don't watch. I don't go out of my way. I watched it when I was a kid. Once in a while I get mischievous and I look for Bugs Bunny on YouTube. Okay. But that's Bugs. Okay. But my point is, but you're not going out of your way to try to cancel Pepe Le Pew. All right. But in this particular Space Jam 2, you got, of course, Mr. Woke King himself, LeBron James. I don't know whatever made this guy some sort of authority on culture. You got LeBron James involved. They rewrote, Bugs Bunny, who would be let's say, for argument's sake, a troublemaker. Bugs Bunny is trying to stop Pepe, and LeBron James is trying to say, inappropriate touching. It's not acceptable. He can't grab other tunes without their consent. The kicker was that Christina Layla wrote this article, is where I got it from. And she made a good point. She said, and this is really good for all you people to ponder before you leave the front line with Joe and Joe. 2020 and 2021, peak Hollywood wokeism. A French skunk gets canceled, while New York Governor Andrew Cuomo, a pervert and a killer, is given an Emmy Award for his COVID press conferences. What did Joe say a couple minutes ago? America is unrecognizable.
I don't get it.
Unrecognizable.
And here's the thing. You can't even talk about it to some people. They just bought it, because this is something we're going to cover on the Crusade channel regarding Saul Alinsky. He basically said, regarding the press, they control the narrative. Once you control the narrative, you control the people. I'm paraphrasing. But that's what's going on. People have just bought the 24-hour news cycle. They've just eaten it up. Depending on what channel they listen to, they just eat it up. It's craziness. I see it on LinkedIn. I see it. You read it in the feed. People just bought into this stuff. Like, it's insane. They're brainwashed. It's actually scary in a way how people are brainwashed.
I think you're right.
It's craziness. I'm sorry.
Yeah.
Where again, you're fixating on a skunk. And you have a woman who says she was criminally assaulted by someone who, by the way, you voted for.
Not you guys, but
the proverbial you.
Right.
And you have no problem with that.
Right.
And then you say you're pro-woman.
Right. And that's borne out by Joe pointed that out. That's borne out by the New York Times. I forgot the writer's name. Said, I believe Tara Reid. I'm voting for Joe Biden.
Anyway.
Right. Doesn't care about Tara Reid. Doesn't matter. Biden doesn't need to get canceled. Pepe Le Pew.
You got a problem with a skunk.
Okay. Now, I didn't grow up with some sort of, warped, distorted view of women because of Pepe Le Pew. Okay. If I got rejected, I got rejected. You know what I mean? If the girl said, hey, can I buy you a drink? And then she said, not interested. Get out of here, Baldy. I left. That's it. If I wasn't Pepe Le Pew, now I start kissing her arm like some Frenchie. Okay. My point is like Pepe Le Pew didn't scar or distort my view of women. You know what did? Pornography. They champion that. They're not interested in outlawing pornography. I'll admit that to all you people out there. Okay. That's something that warps your view of women. Okay. They won't do anything about that, but Pepe Le Pew's got to be canceled because of his treatment of women. You got Hollywood producers, porn producers that treat women like garbage, get them hooked on junk. Okay. So that they'll keep producing the porn, and then they discard them. Okay. And no, you don't hear anything from the feminists, Gloria Allred types. You don't hear anything from them. So the hypocrisy, it's like Joe said, it's like this is America where we let this sort of hypocrisy, this heightened hypocrisy, porn's okay, but Pepe Le Pew isn't. Give us all a break, please.
And that goes to what Jordan Peterson said to end the conversation, basically, as we began. Catholicism is, what did he say, is reality.
Yeah.
Meaning we are living in an unreal situation. We kill our children. Men are marrying men. Men are transitioning into women. Children can transition to the opposite sex. All of this woke craziness. It's not reality.
No, it's not.
I'm sorry. And here's the thing. Look at history. These ideas that we talk about, they're pervasive across all civilizations and across all time. I'll just end this. Enjoy your hour, because that's all you're going to get.
That's it. That's the perfect place to end it. You people are all so very loyal to us. We are so humbled by the fact that you support us week in and week out. We see a lot of new names in the chat room. We see a lot of our favorites in the chat room, people who've been with us for a long time, and we are just so appreciated. I will mention that, unfortunately, there's a couple, we just can't get to every comment, but We love you. We keep our eye on it. We try to keep track of it, but we have to keep the conversation moving, okay? Because Joe and I, we could go on for 5 hours, and you ain't staying for 5 hours, and we wouldn't blame you if you didn't. But we love you, and sincerely, not to say, we love you also very much, okay? You pray for us. We pray for you. We all got to pray for each other. We have to pray for our nation. We have to pray for our culture. And we have to pray more than anything else that the blind have their eyes open, because a lot of these people are nefarious, but a lot of them are just simply blind. All right. Now, we have to pray for all of them, but particularly those who are blind, because they'll open their eyes and they'll see this for the nonsense that it is. Hopefully, Joe and I, all right, are doing our part. One more time. We're on Sunday nights, 8 o'clock live. If you want to support us with a few bucks, you can find us at patreon.com/frontline with Joe and Joe. crusadechannel.com, always on air and always online. The Mike Church channel. Joe and I are on there on Mondays. We would highly recommend doing the free 30-day trial subscription. We think you'll love it. And now we're on Veritas Catholic Network, a station for which you could download the app. They're an EWTN affiliate, so it's 80% EWTN content, 20% original content. Joe and I are very honored that we've been chosen to be part of their original content, and we intend to grow with that station, because right now they're in Connecticut and Long Island and Westchester, soon to be in the next year or so broadcasting over all of New York City. And we want to be a part of that. We're praying to be a part of that. And we want to thank you all for supporting us along the way, okay? Because you keep us going. And these are conversations that we hope you're sharing with your friends, because if nothing else, Joe just want to be brutally honest. Couple of guys, average guys, sitting around the kitchen table, talking the way you guys talk out there. And that's what's been keeping us moving. And people appreciate our honesty and talking about these things. So we really appreciate that. So remember, until next week. Oh, by the way, just remember, also follow us on YouTube and Facebook, and like and subscribe and share and do all that fun stuff, please. And until next week, when we talk to you again, remember that our conversation is your conversation, and that conversation is going on everywhere.